Welcome to the State of Montana Department of Public Health and Human Services Child and Family Services Division online training for mandatory reporters of child abuse and neglect. I'm Sarah Corbally, the administrator of the Child and Family Services Division, where we work 24 hours a day, 365 days a year to fulfill our mission of keeping children safe and families strong. But we know that we can't do our job without reports from mandatory reporters like you. In an effort to assist you in working with us, we have created this online training. I hope that you will find it useful and informative in helping you to determine how and when to report suspected child abuse and neglect in the state of Montana.
Welcome to the Guidelines for the Identification and Reporting of Child Abuse and Neglect for Mandatory Reporters. The race to stop or prevent child abuse starts with you. Reporting is the most critical step in obtaining help for both the child and the family. Under Montana law, any person may report, but professionals and officials listed shall report if they know or have reasonable cause to suspect a child is being abused or neglected. When professionals receive information in their professional or official capacity that a child is abused or neglected, they are mandated to report. Information received in a professional or official capacity must be reported regardless of whether the person suspected of causing the abuse or neglect is a parent or other person responsible for the child's welfare. A person responsible for a child's welfare means the child's parent, guardian, foster parent, or an adult who resides in the same home in which the child resides. A person providing care in a daycare facility. An employee of a public or private residential institution, facility, home, or agency, or any other person responsible for the child's welfare in a residential setting. Although centralized intake is legally mandated to receive calls from professionals who suspect child abuse or neglect, the division does not have legal authority to investigate these allegations when the alleged perpetrator is not a person responsible for the welfare of the child who is the subject of the alleged abuse or neglect. Centralized intake will assess the report, and if sufficient facts exist to make it reasonable to suspect child abuse or neglect has occurred by a person who is not responsible for the welfare of the child, reports will be cross-reported to law enforcement by the centralized intake hotline. However, in cases where additional allegations may arise during the course of an ongoing investigation, then the supervisor in the field is required to ensure that the information is cross-reported to law enforcement. Who are mandatory reporters? Professionals and officials required to report are physicians, residents, interns, or members of a hospital staff engaged in the admission, examination, care, or treatment of persons. Health professionals, including nurses, osteopaths, chiropractors, podiatrists, medical examiners, coroners, dentists, and optometrists, and mental health professionals, including psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, and therapists. Note that any of these professionals who are involved in the delivery or care of an infant shall report to the department any infant known to them to be affected by a dangerous drug. Mandatory reporters also include religious healers, school teachers, other school officials, and employees who work during regular school hours, social workers, operators or employees of any registered or licensed daycare or substitute care facility, staff of a resource and referral grant program organized under 52-2-711 or of a child and adult food care program, or an operator or employee of a child care facility. Other mandatory reporters include foster care, residential, or institutional workers, peace officers or other law enforcement officials, members of the clergy, a guardian ad litem or a court-appointed advocate who is authorized to investigate a report of alleged abuse or neglect, and employees of an entity that contracts with the department to provide direct services to children. Anyone investigating or reporting any incident of child abuse or neglect, participating in resulting judicial proceedings, or furnishing hospital or medical records is immune from any liability, civil or criminal, that might otherwise be incurred or imposed unless the person was grossly negligent or acted in bad faith or with malicious purpose or provided information knowing the information to be false. Substantiated information can be used to refuse to hire or to discharge employees, volunteers, or other persons who may have unsupervised contact with children. A person providing or using such information is immune from civil liability unless that person acted in bad faith or with malicious purpose. The identity of the reporter and the identity of any person who provided information on the alleged child abuse or neglect incident must not be revealed to the parent, guardian, or other person responsible for the welfare of the child who is the subject of the complaint, unless a court requests the information, such as in a hearing or by court order. Reporter identity will be confidential except in certain cases. Reporters may be shared with a county attorney, peace officer, or attorney who is hired by or represents the department. Reporters may also be shared if necessary for the investigation or prosecution of a case involving child abuse or neglect, or in cases where a court permits disclosure in accordance with Montana Code. Any person, official, or institution required by law to report known or suspected child abuse or neglect who fails to do so or who prevents another person from reasonably doing so is civilly liable for the damages proximately caused by such failure or prevention. Additionally, any person or official required to report who knowingly fails to do so or prevents another person from doing so is guilty of a misdemeanor. So you may be thinking, as long as you tell somebody, that's okay, right? It is important to remember that reporting concerns to the boss or school principal, doctor, supervisor, etc. does not satisfy the reporting requirement. Mandated reporters must directly report suspected abuse and/or neglect through the Child Abuse Hotline. Remember, you don't determine if the child is being abused. That's the job of the child protection specialist. If you suspect it may be abuse or neglect, report it. Child abuse and neglect definitions include abandonment, educational neglect, exposure to drug manufacture or distribution, baby doe medical neglect, physical abuse or neglect, psychological abuse or neglect, or sexual abuse or exploitation. Cases of abandonment include the following: when a parent leaves the child under circumstances that make it reasonable to believe that the parent does not intend to resume care of the child in the future, or if a parent willfully surrenders custody of the child and in 6 months does not display intention to resume custody or make permanent legal arrangements for the child. Note that to display intention, the child and the person who has physical custody of the child must both be notified. Or if the parent is unknown and has been unknown for 90 days and reasonable efforts to identify and locate the parent have failed. Educational neglect is defined as the complete failure to either enroll a school-aged child in a public or non-public school, or the complete failure to homeschool a school-aged child. Exposure to drug manufacture or distribution means exposing a child to the criminal distribution of dangerous drugs, exposing a child to the criminal production or manufacture of dangerous drugs, or exposing a child to the operation of a clandestine laboratory. Baby doe medical neglect is defined as The failure to respond to an infant's life-threatening conditions by providing appropriate treatment that, in a physician's judgment, will be most likely to be effective in alleviating or correcting all life-threatening conditions. Under this law, an infant is considered a child either less than 1 year old or hospitalized from birth. However, treatment is not required if the infant is irreversibly comatose, if treatment merely prolongs dying, or if treatment would be inhumane. The definition of physical abuse is an intentional act, an intentional omission, or gross negligence resulting in substantial skin bruising, internal bleeding, substantial injury to skin, subdural hematoma, burns, bone fractures, extreme pain, permanent or temporary disfigurement, impairment of any bodily organ or function, or death. Physical neglect is considered either the failure to provide basic necessities, such as appropriate and adequate nutrition, protective shelter from the elements, and appropriate clothing related to weather conditions, or failure to provide cleanliness and general supervision, or exposing or allowing the child to be exposed to an unreasonable physical or psychological risk. Psychological abuse or neglect means severe maltreatment through acts or omissions that injures a child's emotional, intellectual, or psychological capacity to function. This also includes the committing of acts of violence against another person residing in the child's home. The following are the definitions of sexual abuse and sexual exploitation. Sexual abuse includes the committing of sexual assault, sexual intercourse without consent, indecent exposure, deviant sexual conduct, sexual abuse, ritual abuse, or incest with a child. Sexual exploitation includes, but is not limited to, allowing or encouraging a child to engage in prostitution or films, sexually explicit photographs, or using a child in an exhibition of sexual conduct. You may be thinking, I should probably think about this. I know I'd hate someone who reported me. People reporting child maltreatment sometimes express feelings of guilt for making the referral because they believe the report may bring punishment to the family. But remember, the main goal of CFSD is to protect the child while supporting the family through remediation, not punishment. So what do you report? The reports referred to under Montana Code 41-3-201 must contain the names and addresses of the child and the child's parents or other persons responsible for the child's care and any other children and adults residing in the home, to the degree known, the child's age and the nature and extent of the child's injuries, any other information the maker of the report believes might help establish the cause of the injuries and/or neglect, as well as the identity of the person or persons responsible for them, and the facts that lead the person reporting to believe that the child has suffered one or more injuries or willful neglect. It is also helpful if the reporter has information around the general functioning of the family, such as where the parents work, who is usually home with the children, if the family has relatives in the community, etc. Once the report is made by the mandatory reporter, the child protection specialist is required to attempt to contact the mandatory reporter to gather more information that would assist in the investigation. Generally speaking, the role of the professional personnel ends with the reporting of child maltreatment. Reporting, however, is just the beginning of the child protection process. Treatment, strengthening of families, rehabilitation, and prevention of further child maltreatment still lie ahead. School personnel, therapists, doctors, nurses, and others are increasingly providing assistance and support to the Child Family Services Division staff by participating on multidisciplinary teams to share information about families and children after they have been reported, providing direct support services to the child, the parents, and the family, and becoming actively involved in community efforts to reduce the incidence of child maltreatment. So when in doubt, report. If you are uncertain whether to report or to whom you should report suspected child maltreatment, don't second guess. Don't call a friend or coworker. Do call centralized intake. The hotline is always there, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
Raise your voice.
Montana children deserve a safe, stable, and supportive family. If you suspect a child is being abused or neglected, call the toll-free child abuse hotline immediately.
Raise your voice.
Call 1-866-820-KIDS. That's 1-866-820-KIDS. Silence is not an option.
Please, stand up for a child today.
Brought to you by the Montana Department of Public Health and Human Services.
Raise your voice for Montana kids.
Thank you for taking the time to view our online training for mandatory reporters of child abuse and neglect in the state of Montana. If you would like further information, please visit our website at www.mt.gov/CFSD. On our website, you will also find a link to contact us if you have additional questions. There are children whose safety depends upon you making a report, so please raise your voice and make the call. All Montana children deserve a safe, stable, and nurturing environment. Together, we can give it to them.